Hi, I'm Mike Barnes and I'm here with Hemp and CBD Media.
Mike, can you tell me who you are, a bit about you, a bit about what you do?
I'm Mike Barnes and I'm a professor of neurological rehabilitation, but it's a bit of a mouthful, but it basically means I'm a neurologist who's been working in the rehabilitation space. That's mainly brain injury for many years, 30 odd years. But more recently, well actually not more recently, about 20 years ago I got interested in cannabis as a medicine and helped with the development of Sativex, the original cannabis medicine. Then nothing much happened for several years because NICE said it wasn't cost effective. But then in the last 3 or 4 years I've become much more involved in the cannabis space with the development of a report for the All-Party Parliamentary Group, and then involved with the first license for cannabis in the UK for Alfie Dingley. So I'm now pretty well full-time cannabis physician rather than a neurologist.
And I mean, what does your day-to-day look like? I know you're a busy man, you've got a lot of patients, obviously you can't talk about them specifically, but...
No, I don't actually have a lot of patients now because I thought my time was best spent in promoting, if you like, the cause. So I'm involved in a lot of media work, I do a lot of writing about the subject. I'm trying to help, in a small way, the development of a UK-based cannabis industry, which I think is really important. It's all importation at the moment, so I'm trying to help that. And most particularly, I'm involved in the day-to-day teaching of doctors through the Academy of Medical Cannabis. We've set up something called the Medical Cannabis Clinicians Society, where we get clinicians, not just doctors, but clinicians generally together to support them, to mentor them, to train them, to produce guidelines. So there's a lot we're trying to do to basically move cannabis for medicine up the agenda. So that my day-to-day is very diverse, no day is the same as the next, but that's mainly what I do now.
And when you are training these clinicians, doctors,
Yeah.
what is the one question that they ask most of all, and what's the response to it?
Well, I think there's 2 questions they ask, and all doctors are obsessed with the benefit of a product and the risk of the product. So what they want to know is, what is it really beneficial for? Because there's a lot of stuff on the internet that says cannabis is a cure-all for everything. It's not. It's a very good medicine for a lot of variety of conditions, but it's not a wonder drug. We need to make that clear to the doctors. So we go through the evidence of what there is undoubted evidence for, what there is less evidence for on the benefit side. But the doctors particularly, they want to know the risks, and there are risks to cannabis, particularly high THC cannabis. So we put that in perspective. So after a day's training, they know a little bit about the history, but more particularly they know about the benefits and the potential risks, and that's what they need to get out of the day.
Amazing. We spent some time in the summer, the day after the NICE guidelines came out, actually interviewing Hannah.
Yeah.
And we had a great piece with her. She showed a disdain to what they'd written and kind of the limitations. I mean, what was your view on it? And I know more guidelines came out post that, so...
Well, now the definitive guidelines are being produced. I think they're disappointing. I think they've been written basically by people who hopefully understand the medicine, but according to their report don't seem to understand it. They're trying to push it down the pharmaceutical route. And a cannabis as a family of medicines doesn't push easily or at all down a pharmaceutical route. They're obsessed with double-blind placebo-controlled studies, which cannabis doesn't lend itself to that. You need to assess it from a scientific point of view, but there's ways to do that aren't the classic pharmaceutical single molecule approach to double-blind clinical trials. You know, GW Pharma have done that, others need to do that. So I'm very disappointed that they've dismissed a lot of real, important, real world, as they call it, evidence. I mean, they looked at epilepsy, 9,500 or so studies on cannabis and epilepsy. They rejected the whole lot except 4. I mean, it was just basically crazy. And their final recommendations, like we shouldn't use it for pain, are just ridiculous and fly in the face of international evidence. And all countries except Ireland that have legalised cannabis for medical purposes have allowed the use for pain. Our own chief medical officer said there's conclusive or substantial evidence for cannabis as a useful painkiller, but for some bizarre reason NICE has said it's not. So I have a lot of criticism of that report. The only one good point they made was to promote shared care with the consultant and the GP. They still want the consultant to take charge, which is illogical because consultants know any more about cannabis plant than GPs do. That was the only grain of hope that they might have realised the error of confining prescription to consultants and specialists. Otherwise, I think it was a waste of the paper it was written on.
You've obviously spent a lot of time researching and is the term lobbying for change.
Yes.
I mean, what's still ongoing after these NICE guidelines?
Well, sadly, I think the NICE guidelines have held back the prescription of cannabis in the National Health Service by several years. It's a great pity, because we know it's a good product for many conditions. We know its safety profile. People say we don't know its safety profile, but of course we do. It's used by 165 million people in this world every day, and has been for decades and decades and centuries, in fact. So we know the safety of cannabis. So to say we shouldn't use it because we don't understand the safety of it is a patent nonsense. So I'm very disappointed that the NICE will hold things back. Sadly, it pushes patients who can't get it on the NHS into the private sector or the black market. Neither of which are good. The black market, with some very notable and good exceptions, you can't know the quality of the product. You can for some growers, but not all by any means. And the private sector can produce good quality products, but at a ridiculous price at the moment. And most people in this country, 95% plus, can't afford the medicine from the private sector. So, you know, we've made big progress in a legislative point of view, but we've actually made virtually no progress in a practical point of view to get the product to the people who need it.
I mean, there's been obviously a lot of media coverage with Alfie and others that, you know, children that are dealing with epilepsy, and cannabis is seen as the last resort. Is that is there something we can do to shift that?
Yeah, I think it's sad that I can see the reason. If you've got a licensed product that's gone through the medicine approval route, then it's perfectly reasonable to use that product first. You can guarantee its safety, you can guarantee its quality. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with using every single licensed product. Take the children with epilepsy, there's 24-ish licensed anticonvulsants. Are they really saying that that child has to use all 24? It's reasonable to use a reasonable number. How you define that, I don't think you should see it as a totally last resort. And people like the British Paediatric Neurology Association, for example, said you've got to use all those medicines and the child's got to be considered epilepsy surgery, which is crazy. They're suggesting you operate on a child's brain rather than try a remarkably safe medicine that we know works. So there's a lot of nonsense talked in this field, I'm afraid. How we change, it's basically down to education. And I think the guidelines that have come out are written by people who don't really understand the nature of the plant, and we need better guidelines. The Medical Cannabis Clinicians Society has produced one set of guidelines. They're going to update that in the new year. There'll be another set of guidelines that reflect the world that's changed in the last 12 months. And I think the doctors need to be aware of that and avail themselves of the training programs that are out there, so they educate themselves and they realise it's a pretty safe thing to be doing, and why don't we do it?
Perfect. You've spoken about how you train doctors through the academy. I mean, if there are doctors watching this and they wanted to find out more, where would they need to come? What do they need to do?
At the moment, and I hope there's more teaching opportunities arise out there. At the moment, as far as I'm aware, the Academy is one of the few opportunities, which is a free online teaching program, 12 basic modules. Then there's further more detailed modules. The first 12 modules are free. The other more detailed advanced modules are a modest fee. It's the Academy of Medical Cannabis, which is taomc.org. And I would look at that, and as I say, it's a free program. It takes about 3 hours to go through the basic training. I think that's the start. I mean, what doctors need is not just the basic knowledge, but once they start prescribing, they need mentoring and supporting. And I think that's really important to emphasise, that I think like the Cannabis Clinicians Society will offer that longer term support, whereas you just get the basic knowledge from the Academy, which is great, it's a start.
And who should be looking at that? Is that any doctor?
Well, I think any doctor, because I think at the moment the only people who can prescribe are specialists, basically hospital consultants, and it excludes the GPs. But I think GPs, first of all, I think they will be allowed to prescribe before too much longer, whether it's another year or 2 years, I don't know. But also I think the first port of call for a patient who wants to try it is often the GP. And the GP needs at least an informed opinion. If he or she can't actually prescribe, at least to say, well, I don't think this is suitable for you because of X, Y, or Z, or I think this might be suitable for you. So they need an informed opinion. So I would encourage any doctor, and in fact any clinician, or any patient for that matter, you know, often it's the patient-driven. And Hannah, you talked to previously with Alfie, is amazingly knowledgeable. It's the patients that have driven this change, and educating more patients to educate their doctors is one way into getting better prescriptions, more prescriptions.
Obviously today we spent some time, and retrospectively I'd love to hear, you know, what you took out of that conversation that we've had around this table.
I think a lot of it focused on whether we should push down the pharmaceutical route or not. My view is there's nothing wrong with the pharmaceutical route to promote scientific knowledge. It's nice to take something like CBG. It's nice to know in more detail what it does, what dose it does, how it works, and that sort of thing. And that's a pharmaceutical approach, if you like. Let's develop CBG as a molecule, let's try it out and see what it does. Nothing wrong with that at all, but I think we lose the richness of the product if we pharmaceuticalise the whole thing, and I would like to see, as that conversation reflected, a sort of botanical approval route as well as a pharmaceutical approval route, and eventually the two will meet, probably several years down the road. So we mustn't just pharmaceuticalise the medicine.
Amazing. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Don't think so. No, I don't think so.
I will take this opportunity to thank you for coming down today and your candour and speaking so openly to us. We really do appreciate the time. And
it's a pleasure.
I'm sure we'll be in touch soon with more opportunities and a reflection on what we've captured today.